everybody. It's Higher Density Living. It is the morning. I just got some fillings done. The mics are droopy, and the coffee's hot.
Is your mouth numb?
Yeah, every time you laugh, like I try and like pull my mouth up, and it's like it's all jacked up.
Yeah, it's always funny.
There was this film, I forget what it was called. It had Tim Allen in it, and he got like Botox in his face. And he's like laughing, like trying to drink water, and it's just pouring out of his mouth. Got like a fake tan and everything. I forget what that movie was called.
I told somebody the other day, it was funny. I was on a date, and I told somebody, I was like, well, you look amazing. And she was like, it's all Botox.
Dude, Botox is in.
I was like, no, you look amazing. You know, it's the Botox. It's like,
it's
and then I was like, well, I need to get something with these crow's feet that I have really bad. And she goes, well, I kind of like those on a guy. They're kind of hot.
Yeah, people. Like, no, they're cool. Leave them, dude.
Yeah. So I was
look
like,
at you.
Whatever. Yeah.
You look like you're supposed to look.
Let's talk about that real quick before we because we're going to get into this old school.
This is a first edition copy
UFO
here
book. It's
called The White Sands Incident.
But I want to talk about like what you just said. I think that's a great statement. Why do we always want to change ourselves like physically? I get the whole idea to be, physically fit and, eat healthy and stuff like that. But why is this whole external outward look?
You're talking about like artificially alter the way we look?
Yes. Yeah. There seems to be so much of that.
So if you, your life being here affords you the opportunity, your spirit, to learn from the meat suit it's chosen.
Right.
So what happens when you start to artificially alter the meat suit because the lesson is not being learned for the way you're supposed to look or the way you are energetically projecting yourself naturally? What happens when you go to alter that? Then you're living in the attachment of an idea that's false, an idea that really isn't who you are at a genetic level. And then from that, the spirit can't actually learn, and the consciousness cannot actually learn properly because of the alteration of image in the material sense of what beauty is defined as.
Yeah, and I think it's a fine line too. You have to look at it.
Yeah.
As well as I do. You have to look at it with intention. Because I talked to somebody that had that got fake breasts, and she was just like it literally I mean, there's an acceptance of your body. I get that, but then also having that ability to be able to be like, I mean, if I had something hanging off my face,
fix it. Yeah. No, but if you're doing it straight, that's why I said if it's the artificial idea of an attachment to a certain image that you want to exude, that is not who you really are. I get it. If your breasts are enormous and you actually need to reduce them in size,
for your back,
or something like that, for your health, well then do that, because something about the genetics is not beneficial, right? And there's also a lesson learned with that.
But I don't think there's a moral issue to it at all.
No, I mean, listen, go ahead, alter your face. What do I care?
Yeah. I also think, and this is before we get into this because this is really cool. And I was listening to playwright, very, very famous English dude, and he was talking last night, and he said this. And he said, the more that we evolve, the more that our morals will change.
That's correct, yeah. They don't stay the same.
And people need to understand that. So when you have religion that puts a fine line and says, it's like, the Catholic Church right now, that they're grappling with homosexuality and stuff like that.
Yep.
And so they've had this hard line in the sand, and then priests can't get married, and so it creates all these issues. You're going against evolution, you're going against nature, you're going against the persons.
Right.
But I really thought about that last night, and it was like, and we've talked about that before, this whole idea of morals being fluid. Not so that you can get away with shit.
No, but they evolve.
Yeah.
See, here's how I look at it. GMOs. Okay? Let's think about it. Let's think about like what's morally okay to do with people's food. At first, people were all amped up that you got the seedless watermelon, seedless clementine, seedless banana.
Right.
No one complained. And then people were like, oh, GMOs are bad, right? Because of Monsanto. So then the moral attitude of actually genetically manipulating something that is perceived as natural is incorrect. But why, if you under your own free will trying to evolve something at a rate because it doesn't really evolve on its own natural path to what you want, and it's not destructive to it, you make it healthier, you make it more beneficial. What's the issue with that? So things change. It's like you got this ebb and flow. It's like GMOs are good, GMOs are bad. GMOs are going to be good. Well, and they'll probably continue to be good for the rest of the time. If I, like we talked about the other day, if I could eat a steak,
right,
that's made out of algae. It has no detrimental effects to my body through eating this.
And it tastes like an amazing buttery steak.
Yeah. Then why wouldn't you do something like that?
Everyone would do that. Yeah.
You know, and then let's look at it in this sense. Okay. My child is going to be born with a certain amount of diseases. Somebody wants the opportunity to have a child. What if you had the ability to genetically modify that child before it comes out, so you would know for a fact it'd be born without disease, born without trouble, offer the opportunity to learn and experience things just like you and I in our own healthy state? Wouldn't you want that?
Oh, of course.
Wouldn't you want the rest of humanity to continue to share in that evolutive state? So whether you're doing it to a vegetable, shoving Botox in your face, or, you know, using a CRISPR machine to alter the genetics of a child in vitro, these things will have different views of their morals depending on the group that looks at them. These things will change over time as we evolve and have a greater understanding of ourselves and the universe itself. Energy is energy, right? And our choice of how to manipulate it is our choice. Not that something is necessarily bad or good. It's just how we want to potentiate things to look a certain way depending on how we choose to evolve as a species. So if the collective morals of us that we have come together and say, we actually want to start genetically engineering our children so that if I lose a tooth, it grows back, like it will do for sharks many, many times over, or I want to extend my lifelong age so that I can continue to learn more, let's do that.
Right.
If I want to remove all disease and pain that doesn't need to be there, let's do that.
Well, I think it gets even more personal. Like for me, at my age now, I've gotten to the point to where it's like there's no reason to experience guilt for something that I find, as long as I'm not imposing on anyone's free will and I'm not imposing on my own and I'm not doing something that's harmful.
Yeah.
If I want to do A, B, or C, why am I feeling guilty about it? You know what I mean? It's
why don't you just do it? Go learn.
I have pleasure. And this is where people get fucked up. Is, you know, this programming, this childhood programming that they have turns into this rules and regulations that you must abide by, which creates stress, which fucks up your hormones. The list goes on and on.
Right.
Instead of saying, you know what, I really enjoy not me, but I'm just saying maybe a person really enjoys smoking weed and that makes them feel way more relaxed and okay, perfect.
Well, go do it.
Yeah, go do it. Is it harming you? Are you addicted to it? You have to look at certain things like that.
Are you harming yourself or others? No, just go
okay.
do
Well,
it.
then there's no moral issue with that.
No, and
it's a plant.
If you are harming yourself, well, that's on you.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, those are all your choices, your free will. I respect the fact you want to harm yourself.
Right.
I respect the fact you want to take care of yourself. I respect the fact that you make your own choices.
Are being obligated to something, like let's say you don't feel well and there's a family party that is going to happen and you don't want to go on the weekend. Don't go. Yeah.
Don't effing go.
Don't feel obligated. See, that's what people feel like they lose themselves to feel obligated for things because it comes down to morals.
Social settings with friends, they like lie. They come up with an excuse. Just tell me you don't want to do it. You know what? It doesn't always have to be an excuse. Just say, no, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Or people wait till the very last second, or they ghost you.
Yeah.
Just say it's something, you know what? It's not going to hurt my feelings. This is just some weird idea you have in your mind.
I've prioritized this over that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be busy that day, you know, or I'm really tired and I'm going to stay at home for the whole weekend. I mean, there's a lot of options where you can be truthful.
Yeah.
Because it's actually, when you look at morals and you look at that, and we got to get into white sands, but it's actually
gypsum.
It's actually dishonest whenever you're playing these little games.
You're lying to yourself and others.
Yeah.
So does that help anybody's evolution? No. I asked someone that the other day. They're like, "Oh, don't flatter me, don't lie to me." I'm like, "I'm not flattering you, and I'm not lying to you." I said, "Why would I do that and sit here and just lie to you?" I was like, "Is that of a benefit to you? Is that going to help me? Am I here to just make you just feel better constantly all the time?" They're like, "Whoa, chill out." They're like, "I get it." I was like, "That's the point." Well, don't sit here and think that I'm just here to flatter you, right? Or make something up that is albeit untrue that doesn't benefit anybody.
Yeah,
they were like, "Fuck!" I'm like, yeah,
don't get me started.
You should know me better than that. Like, get out of here.
Get out of here. So we have this really cool old book we got. It's called The White Sand Incident by Daniel W. Fry.
Yeah, doctor.
He's a PhD.
Yeah, doctor.
And he's wrote other books, 3 other books that we see. The Adam's Galaxies and Understanding would probably be a good one.
I know. I'd love to buy it. They're hard to find, though.
We'll have to. I will put this on my. I don't want to tell people what I do.
Yeah, don't tell them what you do because then they'll do it.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine that did that on his podcast, and then people were sucking stuff up for like $150.
Oh yeah, no, don't.
So let's get into what happened. something that drastically changed this doctor's life.
First of all, we got to give a little bit of background on this doctor. So Dr. Daniel Fry worked for a consulting firm back in the 50s for the United States government, specifically the Department of Energy, off of a branch of the United States Army. We have in New Mexico here this place called the White Sand Proving Grounds, where we launch and test a lot of missiles, right? You need to prove that the machinery actually works, whatever that might be. And he was there with his team, and he was not the lead of the team, but he was managing certain aspects of it. He was also not the lead engineer, okay? So he's by no means, way, shape, or form the smartest person that was in that local area of where this event occurred.
Yeah, and it's in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
This is in Las Cruces, New Mexico, just over a certain mountain range of the Oregon Mountains. Now, he is out there on one night. It's respectively quite hot, and everybody was going to, I think, like a party or the bar after work. And the company car was full. So he's like, okay, I'll wait for the bus to come by. Bus doesn't show up for whatever reason. So he's in the lab, and he's like, I gotta get out of here. It's really hot. And if anyone knows, it's down there in New Mexico. It's hot down there in Las Cruces, and out on the proving grounds too, like the sands and everything, it's sweltering. So he's like, I gotta go out and go for a walk.
Yeah, this is July 4th, 1950.
Right. So that's why they're all going out to party, right? So while everyone's distracted partying, he goes, I gotta take a walk. I gotta cool down. And he's walked just about every single path down there on the proving ground, almost every single one. But he finds a new one. He said it's a road, but if you've been to New Mexico, it's not legitimately like a road that's been cut through. It's pretty much two tire tracks that are always worn in the same spot. So he's like, I'll walk this for a bit. So he starts walking, I believe it's on the southwest ridge of where the range actually cuts over. And he gets to a point where he looks up at the stars. It's a rather clear night. And all of a sudden he said one of the stars blacked out. Now, it didn't pop back. It wasn't like a supernova. There wasn't a flash after it. It blacked out. And then 2 or 3 more start to black out. And then he realizes there's a growing radius of the stars blacking out above him. And he's like, this isn't right. Now, he deals in rockets, so he understands trajectories, and he knows in the best case scenario, it's better for him not to actually run until you understand the true trajectory of where this object is actually moving. Otherwise, you can hurt yourself. So he stood there and continued to analyze it. But the problem was that although it was increasing in size, it started to decrease in the rate at which it was coming towards him, which is something that was albeit unheard of. And so as he's standing there, all of a sudden, this object comes down and lands in front of him on the sagebrush. The object's making no noise, but he can hear it crush itself on the sagebrush. And he knows for a fact that the proving grounds at that point, nobody launches the weather balloons at night. There's no other aircraft in the area. There's many specific things that happen in terms of eclipsing stars that could have caused this event. So this thing parks down in front of him, completely quiet. And he's like, whoa, it must not weigh anything. It must be super lightweight. Oh, well, that's obviously not true. It's crushed the sagebrush. And it looks awfully heavy. Is that made out of metal? Yes, in fact, it is made out of metal. So he walks up to this craft. I feel like I'm just redoing the whole book right now. Walks up to this craft, and he's like, this is quite interesting. It's not making a noise. It's not doing anything. It's just sitting here silently. And he said, I threw caution to the wind. He said, typically in a state like this, people will find fear and will run away. And he's thinking to himself, do I go and tell the military? I've already been an hour down this path, and by the time I go, tell them to come back and report it, this thing's probably going to be gone. So he said, hell, I'm just going to stand here and analyze it. Getting some coffee. Hold on.
Well, let me get back to the book while you're doing that.
Okay, sorry. I'm just I'm just telling the whole story as is.
So in the beginning of the book, we have to understand that in 1954, so that was an incident July 4th, 1950, and we'll get into the incident a little bit more in detail as we go through.
July 4th, 1954?
1950. Was when the incident happened. But in 1954, because I want to set the preface for this.
Yeah.
He was persuaded to make a public report of this event. So for 4 years, he didn't say anything about it. Then he says, this in the book, he says this, unfortunately, factors involving the rules of military security prohibited the publication of a large amount of the specific data I received. And then he said that 12 years have now elapsed since he wrote the book. So this is 1962.
Yep.
And he says this, 12 years have now elapsed, and the factors which prevent the publication of a full report at that time have run their course, and the full story can now be told in greater detail. Those same 12 years have seen a tremendous advance in our own space technology, and the accuracy of many of the statements in my original report has now been demonstrated.
That's correct.
And we're going to get into those.
So that's there's a lot of physics that I'm having in this book, and later on as we go through the series, I'll do everything I can to explain it in layman's terms as simple as possible. But around this time, there's a lot of cool stuff happening. And we all know that it's the beginning of the Cold War. It's the end of World War II after a couple of years. Nukes are on the forefront, okay? Everybody's about, who can send it first, who can send it fastest. So all that engineering that goes around actual rocket design means I can get the nuke to the enemy faster than they can get theirs to me. So if you can knock them out quicker, you essentially get ahead. So the idea was speed.
Yeah, and that's been happening. I want to pause here because people need to understand this. You can make missile treaties. It always sounds so great.
Yeah.
So I'm going to cut a deal with China, and we're not going to have missiles. So the United States, we take all our missiles out. We're done. We decommission them. All's good. China, on the other hand, secretly has this underground base where they're making this really fast missile.
Yeah.
So no one trusts anybody. So those treaties really are like just handshakes. But secretly,
nice. Yeah.
The United States, China, Russia, everybody is still doing missile programs.
After they're done signing, the politicians of a show is like, how many we got built still?
The generals are like, nah.
Yeah, we got to increase production another 20%.
So, unfortunately, because of, and we know Raw had talked about this, you know, there has to be a defense.
Mm-hmm.
Even, I think it was up to fifth density where they had defense.
That's correct.
So
there are still people or beings or things that try to harm human life. And the group of the Confederation of our local solar system feels that anything that will affect 70% of life on this planet, they will defend against. So if we go to nuke each other with 70%, they're going to shut that down immediately.
So, that's a big program. But one of the things that he said, and you highlighted this in the book, I thought was really interesting, or someone did, is
it in red?
No.
Not me then.
Yeah. So this is some other person. You had purchased this book, which I loved.
Oozed.
He was talking about a Harvard astronomer saying, that would be funny if it was Avi Loeb, but
no, the
he
guy,
would have been born then.
The guy he's speaking about actually later on did work with Avi.
Oh, wow. That's cool. He said that at least 1 million planets in our galaxy attained the ability to travel in space 2 million years ago.
Yeah.
So when you looked at fractals, which is like
the Drake
universe and a universe and a universe.
We're talking about Drake.
Yeah.
Remember the guy who did the Drake equation?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's infinite within itself, so we got to have this probability. Every star has about 10 planets. Of those 10 planets, there's a percentage that actually can store life.
And so when we're looking at the probability of life on other planets, not only have, like Dr. Frey has seen this firsthand, and we'll get into him actually traveling in a UFO.
Yeah.
But he, in this whole process, he's talking to a group of high school kids. And he says this, and I think this is more relevant now than ever, especially when we see SpaceX and everything going on. And I know a lot of people get excited about that.
He was early on this.
Yeah, he said this. Specifically, he urged the teaching personnel to prepare today's generation for going out into space by teaching them. So this is a beautiful statement, because he's like, we're gonna be a multiplanetary species. That's where we're headed.
Yeah.
If we continue down the road, it may be 100 years from now or whatever, but that's where we're headed as Earth humans. He says, generation for going out into space by teaching them to keep an open mind, submerge their egos, and increase their scope of reality. And what I thought was beautiful about this is those three things sets the premise of the book. Because he goes into...
That's correct.
Keeping an open mind, submerging your ego,
yep,
and increase your scope of reality.
That's correct. Because that ego can bring unrealistic thinking. And increasing your scope of reality, it says, how flexible is your mind to certain ideas that you would otherwise be uncomfortable with?
And we're going to get into a quote in there that you sent me that just, you fucked up my whole weekend.
Yeah, I know. I'm not... Guys, we read a lot, Jason and I do, and I've read a lot of wild stuff. This... I had to reconcile a lot with the words of what was being said in here out of the natural profoundness of the balance of the sentence and how much truth was actually carried with it.
Yeah, and he makes another remark, because I feel like this introduction, the beginning is kind of the philosophy of what he learned.
Yes.
And then the philosophy of how we as a human species can move forward. He said this: the human ego is the greatest obstacle to human learning.
Yeah. And we've done plenty of episodes on the ego.
Mm-hmm.
Because the ego says, I don't need to think about anything else. I don't need to challenge anything else. My own states of belief and internal greatness says that nothing could possibly be in comparison to who I am. And so if you do not submerge or learn to integrate proper understanding with that ego and use it for the good aspects of it as a learning aspect, as a tool, then you're going to find yourself in a rock and a hard place. You will lack the evolutive platform that you need to truly understand your relationship with the universe and creation.
The universe especially. And he says, even in a pessimistic view, 1 in 100 planets could support life. And you had just mentioned that.
Yeah.
But when you really begin to think about that, 1 in 100 planets could support life. And how many millions and millions of planets are out there?
There's billions.
Yeah,
of
billions
planets.
of planets. So
billions of billions. More than you could ever count in your life.
And that's proven. Like science has proven that.
That's fine.
Yeah. So, I mean, and if people have been 2 million years ago, if people were traveling, if space travel happened 2 million years ago, like he said, which makes sense because Rawl talks about that.
Yep.
You know, all these different densities. I mean, a fifth density beings would have been traveling 2 million years ago easy.
Oh, they would have been traveling well over 60 million years ago.
Yeah. So this whole idea of this being something new,
or everybody on our time.
Yes. Are they slightly ahead of us?
The universe is on human time. You know what I mean? Stupid.
And I love how, and we'll get into this part, because I love how he talks about our archaic technology.
Oh, it's the
even
best.
now. I mean, it's 2021. This was 1960. This is, you know, and now it's 2021. So this is 80 something years ago.
And this shit is still so far ahead.
This is what Elon Musk is playing with right now.
Yeah.
He said in lower portions of his talk, Fry called the rocket concept outmoded and compared it to propelling a rowboat across the lake by thrusting an oar out the rear.
Yeah.
And he says no intelligent man would use such a method if he were aware of other possibilities.
That's exactly right. This statement alone has a lot baked into it. I've read the book, I understand it, and I understand what causes him to say something like this, and it is completely founded statement, which we will explain later. I don't want to get into it because it'll give a lot away.
Yeah, but I mean...
But think about that. What have we been doing? Think about a handgun.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, screw that. Think about a flintlock musket.
Yes.
Okay?
Old school, yeah.
I'm going to take something that has to burn, that has to destroy itself, so that I can put something heavy on top of it and then move that object of mass against the friction of an atmosphere and try to get it to be accurate. So I have all these complicated things happening, chemicals that are going back and forth to ignite some idea of propulsion going forward. And then we expand that. What do we have? Then we have bullets. Well, why don't we take that whole thing that was separate and encapsulate it into one thing? Oh, fantastic. Super cool. Right? And then what do? Oh, can we take that same idea and can we apply it to missiles that we can strap people to the front of? So I'm going to put a dude on the front of a bullet, and then I'm going to use some advanced trigonometry and send him up into space. Think about that.
Yeah, and he predicted in 8 years, he said this, that there would be craft, that the United States would come up with craft that would be more efficient gravitational field mechanism method of propulsion. And the craft would literally fall off the earth by reversing the path of gravity.
Okay, what you just said is not something simple, which would...
Well, I know that part, but what I'm saying is...
This was also confirmed by Raw.
Yes.
At the specific time that our United States government would have remote-controlled drone craft in the late 50s, early 60s that would be using anti-gravity technology.
Yeah, and it's there. We can see it. And even... who was it? Was it the Polarians or was it freaking Raw who said that most of our aircraft, most of the UFOs we see are our own military? Raw. Yeah. So yeah, we have the SR-71 sitting up there. That thing looks like a freaking something from the Batman movie. You could put that in a Batman movie right now.
Yeah, it's sweet.
And have him driving it around.
And we think it's cool.
So, and that's 1950s.
That's the 1950s with a slide rule. With people that were publicly funded on this sort of essentially a quasi-private project. Right. But when you have things that no one talks about, completely compartmentalized, you're never going to hear about it.
So I would agree with his prediction, and I guarantee you it's right.
Oh,
that stuff's already...
Oh, dude, I wouldn't doubt it one bit.
I mean, they have, what's the Aurora project?
Yeah, well, listen, in 1954, in the Encyclopedia Britannica, there was a page in there that was actually removed, and the removal was on liquid thorium nuclear reactors, because what they found is that the way they could recycle essentially the parts of the fission process efficiently and safely without much radioactive waste could be done in this liquid thorium, which would solve all of our energy issues. The cost of actually running a liquid thorium nuclear reactor would be like zilch. And what they found out is that this was a solve to a lot of our problems, but they struck it out. So if you ever find a copy of the 1954 Encyclopedia Britannica, look for the page on nuclear reactors.
That's so cool.
And if you get an old copy, you probably will find that the page has been actually taken out of. There's a page
redacted,
missing.
huh?
They redacted it from everywhere across the United States.
And he goes into, he said, throughout history, man's stumbling block has been his refusal to recognize that something is possible. So here's more philosophy, which is...
Stumbling block is phenomenal. The Germans have a word for it. Steinentosis, I believe it's called, which there's an interesting aspect about a stumbling block. One, you're not paying attention for a moment, but you catch yourself. You're headed down a path, but you trip upon something that is real quite in front of you. And then it causes you to rethink about the actions that you were doing. It doesn't hinder your evolution. It's something where it's like, whoa, wait a minute. We're going to trip up here because we weren't paying attention. But this block, this piece of nature that sits there so inanimate, is something that actually wakes you up. I think it's like Steinentosis or something like that. But the stumbling block is such an interesting word because it's a strong philosophical point about our own evolution itself.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you repeat that sentence again?
He said, throughout history, man's stumbling block has been his refusal to recognize that something is possible.
Yeah.
It's dismissive.
It's extremely dismissive. I've talked to plenty of physicists in my life. They're like, no, that can't be done. I'm like, what are you talking about? It can't be done. How do you know? You have all the answers? No. You even see this with people in finance, right? You see this in venture capital. No, it can't be done, can't be done, can't be done. There's all these naysayers. They live a life of impossible.
But think about this. This is what's so important, and we'll get into this later. But I love we've got to understand his philosophy on this. And we talked about this yesterday. You're taking the knowledge that you've conceived. Maybe you went to Wharton School of Business. Let's take this venture capitalist. You've went there and you aced every test, and you're considered a genius.
Mm-hmm.
And you've done this for 45 years.
Yep.
So you have this knowledge in one certain sphere of business for 45 years.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to make every decision of the reality that's around you based off of that small 45 lens. Years.
Yeah.
Even though you may be labeled, society labels you a genius.
Yeah.
How much do you really know?
You don't know anything.
No.
There's nothing known. You have no basis for understanding anything else but what you're in. So essentially, you've distorted your whole reality. What you think you know about creation is nothing. Absolutely nothing.
I see it. I mean, I have, think about Amazon and how many books come out every single day.
Yeah.
You can't, the amount of knowledge that is on the internet and that is in books and out there, you can't assimilate that in a lifetime.
No, you
can't. Not even close.
So that's why you need to have specific filters for yourself to be like, what is something that sits within a realistic framework for me to actually go dive into and then work with?
Yeah, and this goes right into our creational laws. And so this is why no one highlighted this, but I saw this and it struck me because, I'm more philosophical.
Are you talking about in the book?
Yeah,
in
this book.
Don't talk about until we come back for part 2.
Ooh,
Hold on.